Hier ist der Antritt, der Fahrradpodcast auf detektor.fm mit der ersten Juni-Ausgabe 2025. Mein Name ist Gerolf Meyer und ich begrüße euch zu dieser Ausgabe. To our English-speaking listeners, this is just the introduction to my conversation with Peter Weigle at Fenderfest 2025. You can listen to it by jumping right to the start of the conversation. Just follow the chapter marks. Und jetzt wieder auf Deutsch. Je nach Zählweise ist das hier die erste Sommerausgabe in diesem Jahr. Und wie passend, es handelt sich dabei um eine Freiluftaufnahme. Ich bin am Wochenende zwischen Mai und Juni wieder nach Großlüben in der Prignitz gefahren, wo Thomas Becker von Mehrglas Frameworks Fahrräder baut. Ihr kennt ihn vielleicht von unserem Gespräch im Januar. Ich hab's euch nochmal in den Shownotes verlinkt. Tom ist zum ersten Mal vor einem Jahr in diesem Podcast zu hören gewesen, als Christian und ich mit ihm über eine Veranstaltung namens Fenderfest gesprochen haben. Das ist ein Treffen von Menschen mit mindestens mittelschwerer Schutzblechschwäche und wie wir schon im vergangenen Jahr gelernt haben, geht es dabei um weitaus mehr als schöne Schutzbleche an schönen Rädern, zum Beispiel auch um Störche. Und es geht vor allem um eine bestimmte Art Rad zu fahren. Wir können ja mal gemeinsam einen kleinen Test machen und uns genau jetzt fragen, wer von uns etwas mit dem Begriff Randonneur anfangen kann. Wer diesen Podcast regelmäßig hört, wird daran wahrscheinlich nicht vorbeigekommen sein. Es ist aber auch gar kein Problem, wenn man das nicht weiß. Viele Menschen werden beim Begriff Randonneur aber ein elegantes Rennrad für lange Strecken vor ihrem geistigen Auge haben. Natürlich mit schönen Schutzblechen ausgestattet, wahrscheinlich mit einem Frontträger und ziemlich sicher auch mit einer guten Lichtanlage. Und dass wir uns gerade kollektiv so ein schönes Rad vorstellen können, hat Gründe und ist nicht selbstverständlich. Denn der Randonneur, den man vielleicht als französisches Langstreckenfahrrad übersetzen könnte, ist in seiner Geschichte auch mal ein bisschen in Vergessenheit geraten. Doch diese Zeiten sind vorbei. Anteil daran hat zum Beispiel unser regelmäßiger Gesprächspartner Jan Heine aus Seattle mit seinem Magazin Bicycle Quarterly, mit dem wir hier einmal im Jahr sprechen. Jan baut selbst so gut wie keine Fahrräder, aber jemand, der das seit über 50 Jahren macht, ist Peter Weigle. Und seit ungefähr Anfang der 2000er ist er fasziniert von Randonneuren und hat sich darauf spezialisiert. Seine sehr eleganten Räder haben seitdem viele Rahmenbauerinnen und Rahmenbauer inspiriert und sicher auch ein Stück dazu beigetragen, dass wir heute mit dem Begriff Randonneur im Fahrradkontext wieder etwas anfangen können. Weil Peter diese Fahrräder so liebt, hat er zu Hause in Connecticut den French Fender Day erfunden, ein Treffen für Freundinnen und Freunde dieser Fahrräder. Und dieses Treffen ist Inspiration und Vorbild für Tom von Mehrglas mit seinem Fenderfest, das 2025 zum zweiten Mal stattgefunden hat. Tom hat Peter in diesem Jahr dazu eingeladen und er hat sich wahnsinnig gefreut, dass Peter zugesagt hat. Und ich habe mich sehr gefreut, dass Tom mich gefragt hat, ob ich nicht einen Podcast mit Peter beim Fenderfest aufnehmen will. Ich habe sofort zugesagt, bin zum Fenderfest gefahren und nehme euch jetzt mit in den Garten von Mehrglas Frameworks, in dem ich mit Peter Weigle im Halbschatten unter einem Kirschbaum gesessen habe. Im Hintergrund steht ein wunderschönes metallic-hellblaues Fahrrad, vor uns sitzen Menschen auf Bierbänken und um uns herum sind manchmal Tiere zu hören. Ich spreche in diesem Gespräch mit Peter Weigle darüber, wie er vor über 50 Jahren Rahmenbauer geworden ist, wie er die Randonneure für sich entdeckt hat und wie der French Fender Day und das Fenderfest entstanden sind. Es geht um große und kleine Inspirationspfeile, die hin und her über den Atlantik fliegen. Es ist sogar auch ein bisschen Pazifik drin und es geht um die geheime Formel hinter den Randonneuren, die sie zu so schnellen und eleganten Maschinen macht. Das Interview haben wir auf Englisch geführt. Ich hoffe, das ist okay für euch und ich wünsche euch viel Spaß damit.
Antritt. Der Fahrradpodcast von detektor.fm.
Okay, so this is kind of an experiment because as you might notice, I'm not an English native speaker. This is Peter Weigle. And this talk is going to be about Peter Weigle, his history, French Fender Day, Fenderfest, and something we call the transatlantic shift. And I know from talks that some of you are very heavily into the topic, and I don't know if everybody is. And we also are recording this conversation to put it in the podcast. I'm working at a podcast radio station, podcast called Antritt. You can listen to it afterwards again if you want. What do I want to say? I try to, in this conversation, we try to deliver something for everybody. So for those of you who are very, very into the stuff, who know all the nuts and rivets and bolts and by year of production and anything. But also for those people who maybe don't know about Fenderfest or French Fender Day yet. And for me as well, I had not that much sleep because we stayed awake. So this is Peter Weigle. Peter is the inspiration for Tom to put up Fenderfest. So to boil it down, what happens here, we wouldn't be here without Peter and what he does. So this is Peter Weigle. Maybe you want to welcome him. Okay, and I'll finish my talk in very short time. I just have 3 questions for you, so we get a feeling for the audience. Who of you know Peter Weigle? Okay, quite some people. Who of you know about Peter's story? Not too much. Okay. And who of you know about French Fender Day, which is not Fenderfest? Okay. Good. So we can start. And there will be 3 sections of the talk. The first one is about Peter's background, his story in frame building. The second part will be about the French influence, the big transatlantic shift back and forth. And the third part will be about you and Peter, because if you have any questions, you can ask Peter in the third part. Yeah, that's the plan. So, Peter, I was sitting down with Tom just an hour ago, talking about what we want to know from you. And you know what's the first thing that came to our mind?
What would that be?
Well, we know you as Peter Weigle, but if I look at this down tube, there's a J.P. Weigle. What does the J stand for?
I was named after both of my grandfathers, and for some reason they decided to call me Peter, which has always been confusing, and especially legally. It's, if I go to the doctor's office, I'll be sitting there in a chair, and they'll come out to look for John, and they're looking for John, and I'm sitting there kind of nodding off, and then they look at me like, "Are you John?" And I say yes, but I go by Peter, and they look at me like I'm lost my mind or something. So it's terrible, but it's John.
Yeah. Okay, so this is John Peter Weigle.
Right. Yeah.
I guess you all know that just behind you in this workshop, there's somebody who's working there day and night, 24/7, trying to build beautiful bikes, and not just trying. And there are quite some other people here who are building bikes. But you told me yesterday that you started building bikes 50 years ago.
1973. I was hired it was totally by chance. I never dreamed about being a frame builder. I didn't even know there was such a thing as a frame builder, but I was hired by a company that was going to import bikes from England. It was the bike boom. The oil embargo, the bike boom. And I interviewed for the job, and they held back the part that they were going to send me to England for 6 or 7 months because I'd interviewed all these young apprentices or young guys that were working in bike shops, thinking they'd just be like overjoyed to go to a frame shop in England. And either they decided they didn't want to, or their parents wouldn't let them because most of them were younger guys. And for me, it was a chance to get out of town, leave the town I was in, have a little bit of an adventure. A couple weeks later, I had a passport and I was on a plane and I was landing in Heathrow.
So just to understand you correctly, so you wanted to work with bikes, but you didn't want to become a frame builder? Or
no, I had no idea that any of this existed. And it was just by chance that I was hired to do this thing and learn more about it as I got over there.
And then you went to
Whitcomb of England, small shop, no machinery, very basic. dark inside with all these older guys and a bunch of young schoolboys that had dropped out of school. And I couldn't be paid when I was there because the unemployment was so high. But I could work there, and I was getting like a stipend from the States. And they also arranged for lodging for me over there.
Yeah. And why did an American company send over their employees to England to learn frame building?
The plan was they were going to import all of the custom-made frames that the Whitcomb shop made, and they were also going to import some very inexpensive, like Bike Boom, $150 bikes that were being made up in Wales. They were sponsoring a race team. They wanted to make sure somebody was knowledgeable enough, basically, to be on the road, go out and sell these things. When I came back, I was in a van for like months at a time, driving all the way down to Florida and out to the Midwest and coming back up, being knowledgeable about them. But they also wanted somebody that could fix a crash bike. If one of the guys on the team broke the bike, they couldn't send it back to England. So they needed to have somebody like that. I went over there just by chance. Richard Sachs was there. He'd been there for a month when I got there. He had dreamed for years fantasized and dreamed about being a frame builder. He used to look in fancy bike store windows and just dream of this whole situation. Richard told me that when he went over there, he had elevated in his mind frame building to such a high art. Everybody was going to be in a white lab coat, and there were going to be stainless steel counters and white painted walls. And he was shattered. He was absolutely shattered when he got there. I grew up on a dairy farm. I was in cow barns all the time and that sort of thing. I got there. I had no preconceived idea of what this would be. And I'm looking around going, this is great. It's just...
Yeah. And we named this conversation the transatlantic shift.
Yes.
Do I understand you right that to learn frame building, you had to go to Europe? Was there any frame building of this quality, of this class in the US? Or
very, very little. And most of them, it was a closely guarded secret. They didn't want to share anything. If you could find somebody, you went to England, you went to France. That was sort of it.
Yeah.
And when I was there, lots of Americans showed up to build frames. And I don't know why there was this rush to go over there and do it, but that was the time.
Yeah, and we see this with other companies.
Yes.
Like Specialized started as an importing business. And
Sure.
Yeah. So you said you didn't plan to be a frame builder, but
not at all.
There must have been something that made you stay in frame building, that made you like see it and then, okay, this is something I can learn. I want to learn.
Well, I'm really good at quitting frame building. I've tried to do it often. And, I came back and it was the importing business of the shop failed to produce the custom frames they were supposed to do. They were under contract to do all of this. They completely fell apart. When we came back, Richard and I was supposed to just be on the road, and Richard was going to do like mechanical work and do some of the frame repairs if needed. All of a sudden, we're both unemployed. We're downsized or whatever you want to call it, because the company fell apart in England. They're still there, or they were still there at the time, but they weren't producing what we wanted. We would order a 23-inch touring bike with eyelets everywhere, and they'd go, it's going to America. It's the Bike Boom. Send them the 60, the 23-inch red racing bike. They'll love it. It's good, And there were all these other problems. And so we languished. I got a part-time job working in a machine shop across the street from the building that we were supposed to work in. And I don't remember how long it was, but, months, maybe a year later, they asked if we wanted to come back, bought some minimal equipment. And the boss said, do you think you guys could build frames? And of course, we're cocky and just, yeah, we can do this. Ignorance is bliss, And so we started building frames here in 1974.
And what kind of frames, what kind of bikes would that be?
Mostly road racing, criterium bikes, and some touring, but mostly, just regular road bikes. Yeah.
Yeah. And you mentioned you wanted to build touring bikes, or did I understand you correctly? I don't know.
Back then, I didn't prefer to. I raced when I was in England. I raced time trials, and Richard was in the road bike scene. I did some of the road bike stuff, but I wanted to build race bikes mostly, and the touring bikes were something you did, but I wasn't passionate about them at all. Not to offend anybody here, So, yeah.
Yeah. In my imagination, from what you are telling us, there must have been another shift, because it seems like your focus has been on racing bikes. And then at some point,
Up to a point. Well, there's been many. I've been a kind of a chameleon builder. When one of my customers went to California and he ordered a very early Tom Ritchie, mountain bike, he sent me Polaroid pictures of it. I think this dates it maybe a little bit. I know Polaroid's coming back in now, but he sent me Polaroids and I just said, maybe a couple sketches would be good, but he was an engineer, so I'd get like full size, like of the bike that he had made. And I looked it all over and I thought, try and build one. And I built it. And back then, the components were very limited what you could get. Some of the stuff was BMX. There was kind of a composite of things. And I started riding it, and the smile on my face was just amazing. I was still road racing. So every time I'd go on a weekend road racing trip, my roof rack would have my race bike on the top. I'd have the mountain bike on the other side. I would take it off and just let anybody ride it that they wanted. And they'd go shooting around, and they'd all come back with the same big grin. It was terrific. And at that point, I did a deep dive. I was like passionate about the mountain bikes. I still built road racing frames and maybe the touring frames, but it was my head was in mountain bikes. In 1983 and 84, we went out to the Fat Tire Bike Week in Crested Butte, Colorado, which was like at that time ground zero. All the builders were there that built mountain bikes. Tom Ritchie, Otis Guy, Joe Breeze. You go down through the list, they were there. There was a frame builders forum where we introduced ourselves, talked about what we did. There were a couple of races. We did the Pearl Pass Tour, 13,500 feet going over that. And it was electrifying to be out there and in that company of all those people. It was a lot of energy. And the interesting thing is that when I did that, I had customers that followed me. They wanted in on that. It's not like they looked at me and said, "Oh, he doesn't do the racing bikes anymore, so we're not going to have anything to do with him." They followed my passion.
Yeah. And if back in the day somebody would have liked a racing bike, was going to Richard Sachs or to you or to somebody else, the way to go? Was this the usual way of getting a racing bike? Go to a frame builder, not just a shop and buy something from a catalog?
Well, they could. I mean, it was their choice to. A lot of them had production bikes and decided they wanted something that either fit them better or maybe they felt had more, higher status with their peer group, or we all do, but for different reasons. Or back then, a lot of them had their own idea about what they thought would make a perfect racing bike or something. And back then, you needed the order, and sometimes you're building this thing going like, I really don't want to have my name on this or the Whitcomb name on it, but you did it because you were, I don't want to say desperate, but you needed the work. So you weren't always 110% with it. But
how was life as a frame builder back then? Because today, it's a tough business. It's there's strong competition against not just frame builders, against production bikes. And how was your life? Was it an easy life? Was it a good life?
It was good, but sparse, or Spartan. And I think it's always been that way for custom builders. And if they're not passionate about it, I mean, sometimes you will sacrifice the financial gain if you feel you're reaping some of the reward that goes along with it, and it's satisfying to you. But you still have to, pay the overhead. You still have to, buy the groceries and do everything else. It's a tough job, and the number of people that have come and gone. There are a lot of people who came in, splashed real big, all kinds of things. You're thinking they're going to be, they're just going to take over everything, and they're out of business a year and a half later or whatever. It's always been. I think the reward is if you're not happy with the additional reward beyond the financial reward, and to the customer, it always seems very expensive. But the time that you spend and the materials and the insurances and everything else, it's most of the time you're not living the dream, but you're still passionate about it, and so you go on. Yeah.
So now we mentioned road bikes, touring bikes, mountain bikes.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess what most people today and most people here know you for is like French style Randonneuring bikes.
Yes.
And there must have been another transatlantic shift. How did this French style of riding and building bikes hit you,
okay.
if it's the right term?
Can we backtrack just for a moment?
Of course.
Only because we're talking about the transatlantic shift. So we all went to Europe, to England, wherever, to learn how to build frames. And I don't know what year it is, but it was, I'm not good with time, but years after that, the English were still building and all that sort of stuff. And then we didn't pay attention to what was happening over there. Years and years, a decade or two after that, I get this letter in the mail, and a bunch of us frame builders did. And it was a young man introducing himself. His name was Matt Wilkinson, and I believe he still builds frames in Great Britain. He had a Winston Churchill Fellowship grant to monies to come over to America to visit Richard Sachs's shop, to visit my shop, to visit a bunch of other shops, try and glean some information that they had lost. Because the cycle industry over there just took a dive. They're coming to our shops. This is the transatlantic shift, to try and feel what's going on and see what the processes are, and try and catch the vibe and then take it back to the homeland. Amazing. It just went one way and then it went the other way. So he came over and he brought me an English teacup, and all the different things that they would bring. And nice guy. And he went to all the shops and he gleaned a lot of information. Everybody was very helpful to him. And then he took that information back. And like I say, I think he still might be building over there. I finished up the racing bikes or the mountain bikes, went back to mountain bikes again. I kept trying to quit in between each thing, thinking I should get a real job. And sometimes the passion would like wane a little bit, and you'd have sort of a low period. I think every frame builder goes through that. And I went back to the racing bikes. I'm thinking about quitting. And then somehow, I don't know where it came from, somebody gave me a copy of a book called The Japanese Data Book. And it's lots of line drawings. It's rabord drawings inside. It's cyclotouring details. It's not complete bikes in most cases, but you turn page after page and there'll be all these racks. And they tried everything over there. So they tried some suspension stuff. They tried all these different racks, all the beautiful tail lights, all the accoutrements that would be on the bike. And I'm looking at this thing, and I had my eyesight isn't that good. I had these Magnavision visors I'd pull down, and I'm just looking at the photos, studying them. I took the book into the house. I'm writing little things inside the book, and I was trying to figure out what builder had built this set of seat stays. And as time went by, I started to, I knew what Rutan's seat stays would be like on Rob's wonderful bike. I knew what some of the Randonneure details were on the Saint-Gère, and I was captivated. Absolutely captivated. At the same time, Kirk Vicente had just come out with his set of artisan lugs, and I was given a pre-production prototype set or two, and I started carving those up. Richard had gone to the Cirque du Cyclisme the year before, which was a vintage bike event, very high quality, Italian racing bikes, English, bikes, all that sort of thing. No French bikes really there, unless they were like a polished PX10 or something. And he said the next year, he said, you gotta come. And I was going like, So I got this bike together with hand-cut Kirk's lugs, a couple of other things had just kind of come on, burst onto the scene. So I tried to incorporate all of that. I made my first handmade front rack in somewhat the French traditional style, although I look at it now and it's like, oh my gosh. But I didn't like it. Took it off the bike, and I actually built a second one that would be on the bike that I would take down there. And when I left the house, I told my girlfriend, I said, I will probably get laughed out of this place because they're expecting me to bring like a racing bike or maybe even a mountain bike or something, most likely a racing bike. Nobody's expecting this. And I said, this will probably be the only Randonneure style bike that I'll ever build, but this is what I want. I'm passionate, and this is going to be my bike. And I go down there, and at first, I know a lot of the players, everybody's like walking around looking at the bike, and they're looking at everything else, and I kind of keep coming back to it. I let a lot of people ride it. And while the bike is being seen or whatever, that spare rack, I spent the entire weekend, I was just, building the frame was easier than building the rack. And because the racks are like you're throwing the tubing up in the air and kind of, I've got no jigs for them, so I'm sort of building them in plain air or in the air. just anybody that would look at the rack, I would just put it in their hands and say, look at this, and just not in a bragging sort of way, but in an enthusiastic sort of way. And come Sunday, which was the judging of the show, my friend Jamie Swan, who lives over on Long Island, New York, also a frame builder, he came up to me very quietly, he said, you're going to win something. I said, no, not going to happen. And at the end of the day, I ended up winning Best Neoclassic, and I won People's Choice Award with a non-Italian, non-English, non-racing in that audience, and it was fantastic.
Can you give us an idea which year this was, roughly?
2003. I started the bike in 2002. That was 2003 when I went to the show.
And you said you were captivated by the drawings in the book.
Yes.
And what did fascinate you? What was it that caught you?
Some of it was the artistic style. Some of it was just the proportions, the novelty of so many of these things. And at the time when I was doing some of the touring bikes, I was buying racks from Bruce Gordon. He was making very substantial, very well thought out racks, but no real style. There's a country western song that says she ain't good looking, but she gets the job done, and it was sort of like that. They were fantastic, but they were not. There was no art in them, or at least to my eye, there wasn't. So I'm looking at these things, and the French tried everything, and not all of it worked. But each manufacturer was trying to do something that was a little bit different, and all you have to do is cast your eyes on like the Rutan's racks that are on Rob's bike. And just see the grace and the beauty and the integration into the rest of the bike, and it really got me. It really got me.
Sounds to me like, and kind of, how long ago is that? Not much more than 20 years. So you built for about 30 years, and it sounds like a new, like a gate opening, and discovering,
re-energized. Yeah. It just saved me from quitting, getting a real job. So.
And, well, again, we mentioned touring bikes, mountain bikes, road bikes or racing bikes, and those have very specific use cases. Mm-hmm. Like you race a road bike on the road and stuff like that. So you discovered the details, and how did you discover the use of those bikes?
Yeah, at first, the ones I built for myself, I normally don't do long distances, so I wasn't going to do, brevets and try and qualify for Paris. It's just not what I do. And as a frame builder, I couldn't take the time to do that. But I used them as hot rod road bikes with fenders and a handlebar bag. And I had a lot of fun because I was really in great shape back then. I was, just finishing my racing career and going out on those bikes, just a real sleeper, and just like terrorizing road bike guys that thought they were like really good. I shouldn't have done that, but I had a lot of fun with that. And then I ended up with an old French city bike. There was a 650B bike, steel rims, not very good tires, but it was joyous in just like the flowingness of the lugs and kind of the shapes and the racks that were on it, which were not good racks, but they were very artistic. And I started bombing around on that. Just, it was only a 3-speed. It was a Hire, maybe a rear derailleur, and it shifted backwards from the way most derailleurs shifted. But it was just joyous to ride. It was really fun. And that put the bug in my ear to try one of the bikes with 650B wheels. And once I started riding those bikes and realized that not only could I make a hot rod road bike out of it, but I could also ride on gravel. I could ride on bad roads. I could ride on, country trails and that sort of thing. It just became this bike that opened the door to adventure and just lots of different styles. It was wonderful.
The first thing that came to my mind when I knew that I would meet you here was one picture. And this is you, I think, with some kind of protection glasses and like a belt sander and a red tire. I guess it's a Grand Bois or something. And you are shaving off the tire.
Yes.
So I guess, where I want to go with this question is, what about availability of parts, of specialized parts for this kind of riding?
Right. Most of the parts were available. Rims weren't as plentiful as well, rims have been plentiful and then they aren't plentiful again. They go back and forth in cycles. But the thing that frustrated me was for a 700C bike, I could walk into a bike shop and buy any number of brands of hot rod or, really good high performance tires. 650B, there were none. Grand Bois Hetras, which, and a lot of the people, there might be a pair or two here that a lot of them bought the red, this kind of the salmon looking tread, were really great tires, very comfortable, fairly supple, but they had the ribs that ran all the way around, and they were heavier than, I was trying to get something lighter and more sporty, and also in really hard corners on pavement, laying it way over, the tread would start to squirm. And you could also start to hear those, they started making noise, as they're getting kind of towards the limit. It's not a very comforting feeling. And guys on one of the forums, they were talking about, they'd just seen The World's Fastest Indian. I don't know if anybody here saw that movie with Burt Munro at Bonneville. And he's jury rigging all these things, just trying to strap this motorcycle together to do the Bonneville race, and there's a scene in there where he's taking motorcycle street tires and cutting off all the treads, the knobs on the tread, with a butter knife that he borrowed from the neighbor's kitchen. And all these guys are talking about it on this forum, and they're all thinking about trying it. I'm going like, oh my God! I had taken a race car for a friend of mine out to Riverside, California, probably about 5 or 8 years before that, and I watched Toyo with a shaving machine, shave street tires to a minimum depth that were legal to race on the track. And these guys are all talking about, oh yeah, we're going to do it. And I'm thinking, I'm going to try it too. And I knew I couldn't do it the way Toyo did because the car tires are usually flat and then they would break the edge. I'm doing a hemispherical situation. And so I thought, I'll just put in a wheel truing stand, take a disc grinder with a 7-inch disc and just get the thing rotating and just like start grinding away. Well, Christ, it catches the tire, the stand goes flying over I almost killed myself. And I just started backtracking and finally came up with a system that would accurately shave or sand the tire in that hemispherical shape. What was interesting, when you got the Hetra, I could take it out of the package and just lean it against the wall and it would stay there. And by the time I got done shaving, I would only shave in cold weather because the too much heat affects the durometer of the tire. They get hard. When I'm done with those things, you put them against the wall and they just slough down into, like they just slough onto the floor. You put them on the bike, you can feel that suppleness. You can feel that liveliness. As good as the Grand Bois was, these were better. And Kirk Vicente noticed me doing that. We talked about thickness of what was left in the casing and all that sort of thing. And he came up with that first 650B tire that he developed. And then Jan later started doing the Compass brand tires. And I also did a lot of prototype shaving for Jan for tire development for tires that would come out later. I did that under, for him.
Could you sell those new bikes and this new style of bikes to customers from day one? Or was there a phase where you had to experiment day one?
Again, my audience followed me. And a lot of it was my enthusiasm. They would see me at the show and I never bragged about the bikes, but my enthusiasm has always sort of spilled over. And, I put them on the bike, they'd ride it down the street and they'd come back and they go, oh my God, this is like fantastic. And I haven't built a 700C racing bike in probably 15 years, So, right away.
Maybe a tough question, but can you describe this enthusiasm in just one sentence, like the essence for you of this kind of bike?
Big smile after the ride. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very good.
And it's also if I can do 2 sentences, it's the versatility that tire size brings. I mean, you can do so many things on that. Just by adding air pressure or dropping air pressure. I mean, you can do the gravel, you can do, paths through parks comfortably, safely. You can pump them apart. I mean, I've done enough group rides back when I was really fit with hot rod groups across the river, and I'm the only guy on a bike that looks like mine. The first ride that I was invited to, I didn't want to go to, and I thought, I don't know, but it was a friend of mine inviting me, and so I take my 650B bike over there with my handlebar bag on the front, and I'm running late, so I have to take it over in the car. They're all lined up, ready to go. I take the bike out of the car. I'm walking across, and my headlights flashing from the dynamo. Everybody's kind of looking at me. It's a younger audience, and they don't know who I am. And but I get these stares, and I know they're all going, this guy's going in for a tune-up or a spare tire or a spare tube or something. He's not going with us. And then they all took off, and I just jumped in. And for the first ride or two, first couple rides, I mean, the first one, I had such a great time, and I didn't want to do it, but I was having such a great time. Nobody would talk to me about the bike because they're all bike aficionados, and they kind of consider they know quite a bit about it. But all of a sudden, this foreign thing shows up. After a couple of weeks of riding, I'm sitting on the tailgate of my car one day, and this guy comes over. He goes, everybody's really nice to me, but they didn't know what the bike was. He comes over and he said, can I feel those tires? I've been watching you ride that bike. And I said, sure, go ahead. He squeezes the tire and he goes, you might want to check it when you get home, because he said, I think you might have a slow leak. And I said, what do you mean? He goes, well, feel the tire. And I kind of go like this. And I said, that's about 38 pounds. And he goes, I'm running 110. And I said, I'm sure you are. And then he pauses and he goes, but you're keeping up with this? And I said, yeah. And he goes, what's the secret? And I said, there is no secret. And he just sort of shakes his head and he walks away. And then my buddy that's sitting on the tailgate of the car with me, he leans over quietly, he goes, tell me what the secret is. You can tell me. I go, there isn't one, So it's whatever. Like a lot of the tires we have today might have been influenced by the shaving, because it really started to show that we could have higher performance tires in that size.
So this is about 20 years ago, or maybe a bit more. The show you mentioned in 2003, I think. And sometime you started something called the French Fender Day.
Yes.
When was that? And what was that about?
Maybe 2009, 2010. I don't remember. But all of a sudden, all these people were getting very enthusiastic for French bicycles, French parts. You could go on eBay and see all these phenomenal things. And of course, you're always bidding against the Japanese if it was any good. And so I was having customers of mine that they were looking at my 650V bikes or my 700C initially at that point. And they're looking at the bikes and all enthusiastic. And I would have a couple of French bikes in my shop, and I was buying reflectors and taillights if I could outbid the Japanese, which was pretty difficult to do. And I had several customers buy bikes from France and individually calling me. One guy from Manhattan. I had another guy from upstate Connecticut. There was a guy in Massachusetts. They're calling me saying, could I bring this bike by someday and have you take a look at it and let me know what I bought? And I was not the expert, but I probably had more information about it than they did. And I thought, rather than have me spend a Saturday morning with this one guy and a Saturday morning at some other time with another guy, I thought, what if we all just got together at the same time? So they showed up, and each one of them brought a couple of different bikes that they had bought in that style. And we looked them over. We shared the information between us. We all looked at each part and discussed it and everything. It was November. It was sleeting outside. And we did an outside shot with us huddled up with hats on and sleet going by, and with all the bikes out in front of us. We took a picture of the bikes inside, and I put it on my Flickr site at the time, and I called it a mini mock open house or something like that. People started contacting me, and they said, if you ever do another thing like that, could we be invited? And I didn't think much about it. And then people kept kind of pressuring me to maybe get more of this going, and I have never thought of myself as a promoter. I didn't think I had the chops to do it. It was very foreign to me. And a lot of people were pushing me to do it. And finally I thought, I'm going to try. I was very uneasy about it. And to make sure that if I was going to do it and it was worth doing, I started begging people to bring their bikes. I had a whole phone list. I still have that list. I'm calling people, and everybody would go, no, the bike's not quite finished yet. Oh, it's not quite perfect enough. Or I need 2 more parts, or it's not completely together. And I just started encouraging them. I finally learned to say works in progress are absolutely welcome. And actually people would learn from them. And I said, if you can't figure out what goes on something, there may be somebody else that will be good at helping you. I was begging people to come to the first year, and I don't remember how many people we had. Now that people know what a French Fenderfest or a French Fender Day event is. Tom says he's going to do it, and he's got 100 people last year. I'm begging and pleading for these people to show up. And then year after year, it just kept growing. And people like Rob came from the Netherlands, and we had people from Scotland one year. We had people coming all across the country, and it became a real thing. It was fantastic. It was really, really great.
Why did they come this far? What did attract them?
It would be like me going to the Cirque back in the day. It was, I don't want to say ground zero for that style of bike, but maybe it was. And, we all went to the Cirque because that's where all the people with the Italian and the British racing bikes were at the time. And, they heard about it and the vibe and just the good time. There was good food and wine and beer also. That may have had a lot to do with it. So people came. I would put 7 or 8 people up in my house. I sort of ran a hotel that weekend. One year I had 14 people camping on the lawn, which doesn't sound like a whole lot compared to this, but we had the hotel full across the river, and a lot of people that just drove in for the day. It was a wonderful event. Yeah.
And I remember pictures of like French cars, for example.
Yes. Yeah. I called a fellow that lived up the road that had a deux chevaux, and I said, I'm doing this French Fender event. Could I talk you into bringing your deux chevaux down? I said, if you don't want to stay for the day, if you trusted us, we'd make sure it had a lot of room around it. I could give you a ride back home, and you pick it up at the end of the day. Or if you want to come down and join us, more than welcome. He said, do you want me to call the Citroën Club? And I thought, there's a Citroën Club? And he goes, oh, yeah. So one year we had, I don't know how familiar people are with Citroën, but one year we had a couple of deux chevaux. We had a Traction Avant, which was like kind of the gangster-looking car that was in Triplets of Belleville, one of those with the big headlights and everything. We had SMs, which were the Maserati engine, very aero, very high-quality Citroëns out on the yard. And they just added a certain ambiance to the event. It was great, yeah.
And does French Fender Day run up until now? Do you still do it annually, or
no? 2019 was last year, and then with 2020, nothing was happening. And for the next couple of years, and I have not. I've had people ask about it, but I haven't done it since. It's as Tom knows, it's this looks easy, folks, but it's not. You have no idea what he's probably going through to put this whole thing on, the sacrifices, and everybody goes home, and then he's left with, everybody tries. You've got a great work crew. I mean, they're to be congratulated. You're to be congratulated. But even after that, the preparation and the agonizing about everything, and the going downhill afterwards to try and get back to your normal life again. It takes a lot of time and a lot of effort. And I just, not every event lasts forever. This charisma finally, wound down, and I've taken a break, and maybe there'll be another one, but I'm not quite sure at this point. Yeah.
As far as I know, about 2 years ago, Tom sent you an email.
Yes.
And what did you write, and what did you think of it? He
said that he was thinking about doing something like this, and I think that he asked me if he could use the French Fender Day name. And at first I was like kind of not offended, but I was like, man, I don't know about this, but I took a couple of days and I thought about it, and I came back to Tom, and I think somebody was translating or sending, And I said, you're creative, you're inventive. Instead of using my name and then having people be confused, maybe if you came up with a name that was yours and would always be yours, and Fenderfest would be, it happens here. French Fender Day may or may not happen over there again. If it was French Fender Day here, people would be going like, where is it this year? What is it? And by you adopting the name that you did, which was a fantastic name, it's unique, it's individual, it came from you, and I felt that was the best way to do it, and it's great.
And did you see any pictures of the first edition?
Yes.
Yes. What did you think?
I was elated that the enthusiasm, and it's waned a little bit for us. If I had a French Fender Day this next year, it wouldn't be like it was before. I think some of the, a lot of the people have sold the bikes off and whatever. But there's a very enthusiastic group here. I think, again, it's that transatlantic shift where it's just come over here this time. And I saw the photos and I wished I could have been there, but that's why I made it. Tom was very gracious in inviting me. And I knew some friends from France that I raced with or rode with in the mountains and up there were going to be here. And I just decided I was on my way.
It's your first time in Germany, I guess?
First time in Germany, yes.
And you told me that you cycled to Berlin in the last days.
Yes.
What's your impression of between Berlin and Großlüben? Wrapped up in one sentence, no.
Night and day. No, but Berlin was, I was terrified about riding in Berlin, I must admit, but Flo from Fern, he lent Han and I bikes, and we just, because we were going to leave him outside for dinner and that sort of thing. And Flo knows all the places to go. And before I came over, Flo was saying, well, what do you want to see? And how do you want to plan this? What do you want? And I just finally said, just relax. I said, I'm going to be jet lagged. I'm going to be overwhelmed no matter what. And I said, in the end, I said to him the other day, I said, show me the Berlin that you would like to show me. And we rode around and we went past, I can't even name all the buildings, but I saw a lot of bronze on top of a lot of fantastic buildings, big parks, and we saw all the dark buildings from the old days. But we had a great time. We also, in that ride, we stopped, I don't know how many frame builders we stopped to see along the way. And it was just, everybody's different. Every shop is different. Every shop is unique. Everybody's got their own thing going on. It was just wonderful to see that. It was great. It was wonderful.
And the frames and the bikes, maybe the frame builders you see here, is there a different, different vibe, a different culture, or is it something?
Oh yeah.
Okay. How's it different?
Well, I saw some of the guys that were doing cargo type bikes. Flo's bikes are different from what I would do. I would say Tom's bikes are more aligned with, or at least, the ones, the Randonneuring bikes that he has that I've seen are closer to what I do. I see these, a lot of disc brakes, different transmissions, and all that's great, and they all have a purpose. There's a reason why they're there, but it's not just because I'm in Germany, but they are foreign to me when I see some. I mean, it's neat, and there's a lot of experimentation going on. People are playing with a lot of wild stuff just to get attention, and I used to call that peacock feathers on a frame, where they're doing crazy paint jobs or odd things just to try to stand out from the crowd. We've all done it.
Yeah. To sum the second part up or close the circle.
Sure.
Let's get back to your bikes. There's one standing here.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's a tough or easy question, but what would you say? What makes J.P. Weigle?
When I built that first bike with the Vicente lugs, those lugs were quite busy. Tom has some in there and he uses them once in a while. He carves them up a lot, sort of the way I do. I used to try and put like added elements in the bikes. And the bike that I took to the Cirque the lugs were kind of Nervexy, pretty fancy in that regard. And I always thought that was what I needed to do. And I thought that, adding, those are my peacock feathers, if you will. The paint job was about this color, or something similar to that with white panels. It was fairly understated. I wanted to look dignified and handsome, but it had fancy lugs and some fancy details. And over the years, I've started to minimize, not because it's easier. The lugs on this bike are plainer than what I used to do, but they're, the long point, they flow nicely. They don't, if people are familiar with like Hetchen's bikes of the old days, the lugs overtook everything else. And some people go crazy over them, think it's the finest thing in the world. Other people think the bike's just been run over by the lugs. And I've minimized things on my bikes over the years. I've tried to make everything purposeful. I've tried to make everything so that I don't look at it a week after I built it and start ripping it apart with my eyes, which I've done most of my career. And it's only, I don't know, where I've got, as of late, where I've really gotten comfortable, I can look at the bike and not say, oh, I would change that the next time. I would change that and I would get rid of that and I'd never do that again. And, the racks on these bikes are inspired by the Rutan's bike, but they've transcended that in that, the headlight mount and those sort of things. I'd never seen that before. And it was just, I kept looking at it with my hand, just thinking, well, these headlights, everybody's putting like a L-bend piece off the end to hang a light out in space. And I'm thinking, what if you just continued that curve and kept it going forward? And that just ended up being the appendage that the light would go on. To me, it was like just such a fine refinement of something that had, not a refinement of something come before, had taken what had come before and moved on for the modern lights that they didn't have back in the day. Rutens would usually put a dynamo on the fork blade, and there would be a monoblock with a light mounted on it. So there's no reason for him to do this back then. But our lights have changed, and I wanted to make it timeless, but bring it forward for what we have today without ruining the aesthetic.
Are you still taking orders?
Maybe. I've got a couple. I also, I still do some repair work. What I would like to do is get through the next couple that I have, and then it has to be, the order and the customer have to align with me. In the old days, you would have these dictatorial customers that would come in, I want this, and I want that, and I want this, and they're just like, they're making you do things that you don't want to do. But like I said before, you needed the order, so you took it. And these days, I want to build what I want to build, and if the customer aligns with it, and it's a beautiful thing that way, it's great. And if it doesn't, or if he's asking for something that I plain don't want to do, what I try and do is think about what builder more or less specializes in that, and try and help them transition to that builder instead of saying, "Oh, get out of here." I'd rather be helpful and see if I can't find them a builder that might be really excited to have that order.
So we can now move on to the third part of the conversation, where you can all check out if you can align with Peter and maybe order frame. But before that, because that was it with my questions. Thanks very much.
Appreciate
for sitting down here with me.
And pleasure. And thanks for inviting me, Tom. And thank you to Flo and Han and Tina, everybody that's been so helpful to make me feel comfortable here and invite me in the first place. So big hand to them. Thank you.
And I want to add, thanks for, like, in this transatlantic ping pong.
Yeah.
Thanks for
it's an interesting
passing the ping pong ball to Tom.
Yeah.
Make us all come here. So anybody has a question, let me know. Just give me a sign. I'll come around.
Don't be shy, and if you don't, we'll go drink beer.
There's somebody over there. He's looking like he has a question.
Yeah, how you told the story about how the Randonneuring fashion, I call it, came about in the early 2000s. I always wondered what was about the Japanese influence, and why was it kind of didn't play that much of a role? I always thought you could just go in Berkeley in a shop and buy a Toei.
Yes. Yes, or
why? How does
Ibaisu? Part of it was, the time. It was, I don't want to say pre-internet, but some of it was just about pre-internet, and so the knowledge of knowing, I always knew Toei existed. Always knew they were out there, but when I wasn't interested in that style of bike, I just wasn't interested in it. And then, with the internet and photos and, connectivity and all that sort of thing, as I got into it more, I started looking at they make wonderful bikes. And when I was in Japan for a different event, we had time to run around and see some of the builders, and we went to Toei. And it was funny because I walk into a shop like that, and, I'd been building for a very long time at that point, but I didn't want to come in, I don't want to come in with a swag. I don't do that, but I never know how to walk into a well-known thing. It's like going into Alex Sanger's. They've been doing it for an awful long time. I mean, I have too, but they've specialized in that style of bike. And so we went to Toei and, got all the bows and everything. There was one employee there that spoke English, so it was easy to translate and, figure everything out. And we decided not to take one of my bikes. So if we rode there, that would have been fine because that was our mode of transportation, but we didn't have time to do that. So we took public transportation there and decided it was best not to take one of our bikes because that would be like showing off or something like that. But went there and went through everything. They showed me a lot of their things. Amazing facility, very simple, but well thought out. And I said before I was leaving, I said, I see no rack building equipment here. And they make racks, but in my mind, I was wondering if they made them here, if they made them someplace else. And it goes like this, reaches down underneath the bench, pulls out this flat plate with a lever on it, bolts it down to the table. And this is the owner, and he doesn't speak any English. So he's just like putting it all together. And then I see him walk over and get a piece of tubing. And he's got a very, very long pair of verniers, vernier scale measuring thing. And he's measuring to the end, and he's like, finally a little bit. He's got like absolutely perfect. And then he puts it in this is to build the oval for the rear platform, puts it in the die, bends the first, one end of it. Then he slides the thing around, and I put my hand up and I told the translator, I said, I've been out of my shop for a long time. I'd really like to do a little frame building here. Could I bend the second half? And usually when you make that oval platform, when I do it, I leave the tubing long, it overlaps. You get to the end and I'll make a mark on it. I'll cut it with a hacksaw, and then you bring it the rest of the way. And I get to that point where I normally would stop, and he goes, encouraging me to keep pulling the handle. And that the two tubes come together just like that. And I just went, much respect. But they make that same platform every single time. So they know what the dimension is, but it was very impressive. It was ready to braze like perfectly. It was like, much respect. It was like wonderful. It was really neat. They were very hospitable, and it was a treat to go there. So,
does it answer your question?
It seems like it existed. A parallel development would have invented like a very similar bike. Like there was within the US very little interaction.
Well, I didn't reinvent. I rediscovered.
Yeah,
that's all. The French had been doing it forever.
Yeah.
And got it right, by the way. It's like being inspired by anything that exists. Berkeley was a long way from Connecticut. If I lived in San Francisco or something, maybe I'd be in the shop all the time and I'd go over there and steal ideas or something. But they're over there, and there wasn't, it's a very respectful shop.
I think in the same way that the English frame building tradition was exported to America, the Japanese kept a lot of the French building technique alive, and the data book came from Japan to us.
Yes,
and Saint-Ger only stayed in business because of Japanese collectors. For the 1970s, the reason Saint-Ger survives and not Randonneure or other builders was because of Japanese collectors coming and buying bikes from Ernest. So I feel like they kept the flame alive of this style of bike building.
So it's not just transatlantic shift.
Hi, about the trip to Japan, was it the one with the yellow Randonneur bike of yours in the BQ?
Yes.
And did you also see CSC Rose's shop back then?
Yes. One of the reasons we were going there we were invited to be on one of his owners' meetings that was, the ride up through the mountains and everything. And the funny story with that yellow bike is I built it, and I didn't know about going to Japan yet. And the paints that we use have been changing over the years because of VOC compliance issues, government regulations, and all that sort of thing. So I was losing the particular paint that I was using. One of the paint reps came by, and it was a new kind of paint, and I needed a sample. And he said, well, here's the color chart. It was, a fleet chart of some sort for trucks or whatnot. And he said, just pick a color. And he said, I'll get you some of that, and you can just paint, try it out and see if you like it and see if it's durable enough. And so I just looked at the chart, and I didn't care. I'll take that one right there, that bright yellow. And then all of a sudden, I'm invited to go to Japan and everything. I'm flying over on the airliner. I've got the bike and the hard case down there. I'm going over as the ugly American with this garish. I just wanted to kind of blend in, and I'm thinking, oh my God, what's this going to be? Well, I get over there and realize that they love those colors. And we were on the Hirose ride up in the mountains. There was another guy that had a Randonneur bike that was even brighter and sharp. It was a better color actually, and it was beyond me. And I'm thinking, I'm okay here, but it was very distinctive. And while we were up there, I was riding with Jan, and we're jamming around, and Han was there. We were chasing each other, and went with another guy down all the switchbacks and all those sort of things. It was fantastic riding. And I just asked Jan, I said, because he was talking about the Concorde machine coming up, and I said, what would a bike like this be a possibility, with some changes? Would something like this even be in the running or in the ballpark? And he said, yeah. He said, had a couple of comments, and that's what got us to France the next year for the Concorde machine, was that trip to Japan and just the question about whether a bike like this would be suitable. And, and how do you know of Hirose? I mean, have you
just from all the Bicycle Quarterly reading?
Yes, yeah, he amazing man, and also very enthusiastic for his work. And he has an owners group, riders group. They can't wait to do these things with him. And you see him in the magazine. He's so traditional, and it's all like kind of old Japanese. But he had his van up in the mountains as support. And one of the places that we were, mountain streams going along, and all these twisty little roads with no traffic and everything. And you'd get to one of the stops, and he's got the truck there, a fairly modern Toyota, Honda, I don't know. And there's a modern microwave making these big pastry puff things. He was like, he's so traditional, but he's got this high-tech thing going. It was like kind of an interesting, wonderful man, by the way. Yeah, it was pretty neat.
Great inventor, and all the different solutions he did for brakes and stuff and everything. It's quite interesting.
Yeah, he's very inventive. Yeah. And good at it. Yes.
I saw your bike at Concorde Machine in France.
Yes.
It's about 8 years ago.
Yeah, we rode together. Our group, and some of them were here.
But my question is, are there still developments in your bikes, or have you reached some level where only small details?
Probably small refinements and small details. And every time I'd go to the Cirque, I would build a new bike every single year for myself. I learned not to build for customers to go to the shows, because they would end up asking for things that you really didn't want to show, or you didn't think they were going to like nail it enough to be, show worthy. I went down to the Cirque to win prizes. I mean, I was competitive, I really was competitive. And one year I went down and I had a customer, oh yeah, I'd let you do that, and I'd let you do that. And towards the end, everything started changing. Then the colors changed. It was the only 1 year that I didn't win a whole bunch of things down there. And I learned after that I just have to build them for myself. And so each year it was a chance to build another bike, refine it, and then the year after that, refine it. And I know a lot of builders that have ridden the same bike like forever and haven't experimented a whole lot, which is okay. But when you can keep changing things, make little incremental changes. Somebody asked me yesterday about seat angle, and I said to him at one point, there's a lot of talk about, being back behind, a little bit further back and being able to push the pedals and over and all that sort of thing. So I really hadn't experimented with that in an awful long time. And I built one of the Randonneure bikes. It was going to go down to the show with a 72-degree seat angle. And when I finished the bike was gorgeous. It won a bunch of prizes down at the Cirque. A bunch of people rode it and really liked it. I couldn't make any power on the bike. I was like a dog on that bike. And I finally thought, I just have to let it go. And I was feeling guilty about the guy really wanted it. He saw the photos and he decided he wanted to buy it. And I'm going, God, I hope he doesn't have the same experience. I really felt like I shouldn't be doing this. Well, he came and picked it up, and he started calling and saying, this bike's amazing. He said, I never could beat my brother before. And he said, I'm just killing him now. And he said, it's whatever you did is just fantastic. So it's really subjective. And, but I tried that. And I would try those things, not only for myself, but for my customers, because sometimes somebody has a very short femur or long femur and you're trying to accommodate that. But it's, I would say a lot of small refinements. There've been some experimentation within that. But, the French bikes were highly evolved in the 50s, in the 60s. And have we done anything any better? I'm not sure. I do know that I have lots of customers that bought the French bikes, also ordered from me, and they were thinking they were going to buy ride that vintage bike forever and all these things. And I think a lot of times the equipment, the derailleurs were older, and there's no shop they could take them in to have them worked on. So it didn't work for a lot of customers, but so they ended up riding my bikes and felt they liked them better. But
does anybody else have a question? Okay, so Tom, thanks for inviting Peter. And Peter, thanks for telling us the story.
Thank you for allowing me to be here. I appreciate it. Thank you.
And there's so many people here, and that's just a personal thing that we all need people like you, because you are the full-time magnets of fascination, and you pass the stuff along across the Atlantic and Pacific and all of that, and we all profit from that. And without you, it wouldn't be here. So
thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Was ihr hier gehört habt, ist der berufliche Teil dieses Wochenendes für mich gewesen. Und wie so oft denke ich mir, das muss ich erstmal ein bisschen sacken lassen. Ich habe im Januar schon mal vor diesem Kirschbaum in diesem kleinen Dorf in der Prignitz gestanden, und wenn mir Tom damals gesagt hätte, dass Peter Weigle schon im Sommer mit uns dort sitzen würde, wir hätten uns wahrscheinlich gegenseitig gekniffen. Dieses Interview mit Peter Weigle ist dabei nur ein kleiner Ausschnitt des Fenderfest 2025. Und neben eleganten Fahrrädern verschiedener Herkunft ist es dort schwerpunktmäßig um Tandems gegangen. Über 20 Doppelsitzer sind auf der Wiese hinter Toms Scheune ausgestellt gewesen, und ihr könnt euch vielleicht vorstellen, dass mir das sehr gut gefallen hat. Nach dem Gespräch mit Peter konnte man auf der Dorfstraße in Großlüben alle möglichen Fahrräder ausprobieren. Ich bin verschiedene Tandems gefahren und sogar mit einem Schrittmacher-Motorrad, und ein Eis habe ich auch noch bekommen. Abends wurde getanzt, und am folgenden Sonntag sind wir alle gemeinsam zu einer schönen Runde übers Storchendorf-Rühstedt, Wittenberge, Perleberg und Bad Wilsnack aufgebrochen, und am Ende hat's sogar noch geregnet, was ich persönlich für ein Schutzblechfest ja für absolut angemessen halte. Das alles und noch mehr hat in einer derart angenehmen, freundlichen und offenen Atmosphäre stattgefunden, dass ich mich hier einfach auch persönlich bedanken will. Das Fenderfest haben Tom von Mehrglas und Tine von Gramm Tourpacking geplant, und viele Menschen haben dabei mitgeholfen, dass es so ein schönes und auch inspirierendes Wochenende geworden ist. Danke euch allen. Ein extra Dank geht außerdem raus an meinen wilden Tandem-Co-Piloten Thilo Schmidt, der mit mir nicht nur eine wunderbare Langstreckenanreise durchgezogen hat, sondern auch spontan die Aufnahme des Interviews gesteuert hat. Außerdem hat Stefan Hähnel wie so oft fantastische Fotos gemacht, und wenn ihr Peter auf dem Podcast-Cover im Eingang zu Toms Werkstatt stehen seht, das war Stefan. Geschnitten haben diesen Beitrag Stanley Baldauf und Benjamin Sardani, und mir bleibt nur zu sagen, dass es auch im kommenden Jahr ein Fenderfest geben wird und schon in der kommenden Woche einen neuen Antritt. Am Freitag, dem 13.06. ist es soweit. Ihr erreicht uns bis dahin unter antritt@detektor.fm sowie auf Instagram und Mastodon, und ich habe jetzt noch eine Durchsage für Kurzentschlossene. Wenn ihr schon eine Weile darüber nachdenkt, diesen Podcast bei Steady oder Apple Podcasts zu unterstützen, dann ist jetzt ein richtig guter Moment dafür. Denn am 14.06. und wenn ihr wollt, auch am 15.06. findet hier in und um die Redaktionsräume von Detektor.fm unser erstes Antritt-Treffen statt. Wer uns unterstützt, kann kommen und findet im Feed bei Apple oder auf Steady alle Informationen zu unserem Treffen in einer extra Audiodatei. Wir bekommen bei diesem Treffen Besuch von einer Weltmeisterin in gleich mehreren Disziplinen, und wenn ihr jetzt noch aufspringt, dann könnt ihr dabei sein. Es wird sich bestimmt lohnen. In jedem Fall wünsche ich euch gute Fahrt durch ein hoffentlich schönes Wochenende und sage ganz einfach: Danke fürs Zuhören, macht's gut und bis bald.